announcements. Very good. And I know our guest, Mr. Siegel, has constraints on his time, so we'll move into his presentation as soon as we complete identifying ourselves around the table as your hosts.
Dick Richards, here in Gold Canyon forever.
I'm Dave Coward. I'm also a Gold Canyon resident and the director of GCCI.
Okay. I'm Matthew Bartola, secretary of GCCI, also a resident here in Gold Canyon.
Good morning, Jeffrey. My name is Jerry Stevenson. I'm chair of the Transportation and Safety Committee with GCCI.
And we have other board members apparently participating through Zoom. Would you identify yourselves?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Nauer. I've been at Gold Canyon about 12 years now, and I'm on the board of directors.
And chairman of?
Chairman of, I chair and coordinate the planning efforts of the group in the community.
Thank you.
And I'm Charlie Goff. I'm a member of the GCCI board and chair of the Conservation Committee. Been a resident of Gold Canyon since 2014.
And board member Maxine Brown is unable to join us. She has a family health situation that she's taking care of.
Also Sandy Smith.
And yes, I was going to say, and Sandy Smith is also a board member, but also doing some caregiving with her spouse at home, so unable to join us. We have some community members present, and would community members please identify yourselves?
Mike
Marshall
DeRosa.
Lundell, yeah. Gold Canyon for 9 years.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mike DeRosa, just got here about a year ago.
Thank you, Mike.
Roberta Russell, I'm a resident of Mountain Brook.
Thank you and welcome, Roberta.
Mary Nelson, I'm also a Mountain Brook resident.
Thank you, Mary.
I'm Pedro Balsa, and I live over in Superstition Highlands. And we recently had our address changed from Apache Junction to Gold Canyon. So I thought I'd drop in and see what it's all about and get familiar with what's going on. I've been a resident at Superstition Highland now for 12 years.
Welcome, Pedro.
Congratulations.
Anybody else from the community want to introduce themselves? Okay, we'll proceed, and we intend to have a presentation by Mr. Siegel and have brief time for questions and answers, respecting his time constraints. Jeffrey, we did not have any formal biography on you, but I know that you're a longtime owner of Renaissance Festival in a community of outdoor presentations similar to yours from throughout the country. So, Mr. Siegel, you're on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being invited today. And my name is Jeffery Siegel. I am the producer of the Renaissance Festival, and I'm a 35-year resident of Gold Canyon. So, and bear with me, I'm not familiar with Zoom meetings. We actually, throughout the pandemic, most of our work was done using a conference call format for our at-home meetings. So I have notes in front of me, and if I'm glancing away a lot, I apologize. I don't mean to be awkward. I just think in order to protect your time as well as my time, I would have some notes handy to stay on track. So I think what I'd like to do is just very briefly, a little bit of personal background, tell you how the Renaissance Festival was started, here and why it was started here. And then some questions if there's time for questions. So my personal background, as a very young person, I lived near I'm from Minnesota. I lived near a college campus. And during my grade school and junior high years in particular, and some high school, I got involved with activities on the campus. I helped set up chairs for concerts, and they would let me participate as a neighborhood kid who would just help out. Minnesota is also the home of one of the largest state fairs in the country. My mother was always involved with a community group at the state fair. My father was helping one of our relatives who had an exhibit at the state fair. So as a child, I spent a lot of time at the Minnesota State Fair. So as I graduated high school, I started to lean my education towards arts, arts production, graphic arts, that whole world of entertainment and public exhibition activities. So that progressed to a point where I started working on these types of events and other similar events around the country. And also there was a point in history where themed shopping centers like South Street Seaport in New York or Harbor Place in Baltimore, Faneuil Hall Quincy Market in Boston, they were all retail and office and residential mixed-use developments that had an entertainment component. So I started working in that world of bringing those kinds of activities into the mix of these mixed-use developments. So after a number of years of a career, in around 1987, 88, I had, and by the way, I didn't mention, a big piece of that early life was public arts sector, museums, public park systems, and other public institutions. So I had this idea of kind of doing a hybrid between my public arts experiences and training and the private sector experiences. And I had the funding put in place to start a new festival venue. I was looking all over the country, actually. And what happened, and bear with me while I get to my notes for a minute. I came to Arizona. Arizona certainly had an appeal being a Minnesotan. It had an appeal because the arts community that I was familiar with was very busy in the spring, summer, and fall, but had less venues and opportunities in the winter. We had a series of meetings, and the Arizona State Department of Tourism took particular interest in us choosing Arizona for placing the project. So they assigned staff to work with us. And then the State Land Department took interest. They assigned staff to work with us. And I can tell you, I drove north. I wanted to see how far north we could go to get into what I would consider a traditional wooded Sherwood Forest kind of a setting, with still having reasonable proximity to the metro area so a family could attend and get home in a reasonable amount of time. That was a little too far. We went to the West Valley and looked at some sites. We went to the south and then eventually came out to the East Valley. I don't know if any of you or many of you are familiar with Roy Hudson. His name is on a civic building in Apache Junction. He was a county supervisor. Roy took a particular interest in the Renaissance Festival project, and he asked us to meet with Apache Junction Chamber of Commerce and other political and business leaders in Apache Junction. Gold Canyon was kind of just a name. It wasn't that large a community, as you well know, I'm sure, 35 years ago, right? But he also brought us to meet people in Globe and Miami and Superior. There was a real hunger to have something to draw people out to this side of the valley and get them acquainted with Gold Canyon. And Apache Junction, I love Apache Junction, but it had a very mixed reputation in those days. And, you know, if you talk to somebody in Tempe or Scottsdale, they would think you were asking them to drive to California to go to Apache Junction. It's the other side of the planet, or maybe they were going to Canada, I don't know. But anyhow, Mr. Hudson then engaged us with Pinell County, and the county took great interest, the county planners and the supervisors. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but Gold Canyon at that time, some of you may know, Highway 60 in 1988 ended at Power Road. There was no Bosch's Plaza. There was no gas station. There were much, much fewer homes. Mountain Brook was, I think, just starting its planning and permitting process. There was one golf course. I think we have 5 now within a few minutes here. And of course, the beauty of the Superstition Mountains, the notion that the Pinell Pioneer Parkway, which was for many years a primary route from Tucson up to the Metro Phoenix area, was a nice, convenient shortcut for an audience that might want to come from the Metro Tucson area to come up what we might call the back way, so to speak. And so in 1988, working with all the parties I just mentioned, this particular location was cited and permitted, and it was zoned and planned to be a special events park, not a once a year annual consideration, but to be a arts festival park. And of course, one of the other key factor back in those days, in addition to being very, very few houses comparative to today, residents, there were no stoplights. You could leave the Renaissance Festival and drive to Los Angeles without going through a stoplight. And that's changed our life quite a bit in the last time. I mean, the stoplights are there for good reasons and important reasons, but because I'm sure at some point here you'll want to talk about our traffic. And that's been a big factor in some of our aberrations and situations. So this was a wonderful place to be. I became a resident, and we've worked very hard over these years with our project. So bear with me. I'm going to go back to my notes for just a moment. Yeah, the Valley, by the way, in those days also just had less venues. There were less sports venues constructed, less entertainment events and festivals and fairs and tournaments and things. I mean, this, as you know, Metro Phoenix has exploded in the last 3 decades and probably will continuing forward. But back then we were, I think we were lauded quite well. The realtors used to love us because we were drawing people out here. Now they're angry with us because of our traffic. Can't get people out here on the weekends. So again, bear with me for just 1 minute. So it's 34 years later. Our artists, the people we work with who travel and work at events around the country, we have a large Arizona contingency of artists and participants, but we also have a percentage of folks who come from all over the country. And these all types of people, everything from zany, wacky artist types to former doctors, lawyers, teachers who have retired and now they make arts and crafts for a living and set up at various Mill Avenue Art Fair, Renaissance Fair, those sorts of things. But our artists tell us that in their view, we are one of their top events in the country. The media and the PR and the critical accolades in those years were quite good for us. We have employees, many, 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 seasonal and year-round, who have been with us for all 34 years. So I'm hoping that says something to us about us, that we've retained our people because we work hard to treat them well and do a good job and make mistakes occasionally, learn from our mistakes, and just keep improving and trying to keep the place up and nice and happy. I think you all know, as residents of this area, we do have a big impact on traffic. And and this is self-serving, admittedly, when I say some of these things, but I do mean them. So we're open 19 days a year on these weekends, and 1 3-day weekend with President's Day. And I would tell you that there are many, many days where we have traffic arrive. And let me step back for a minute. I do want to say, we are not like a sports event or a concert where everybody arrives for the beginning, and most people leave at the end. We have a morning audience that arrives in the morning. We have a midday audience that arrives midday. We have an afternoon audience that arrives in the afternoon. A significant number of the morning people, excuse me, my computer is trying to, my computer just tried to do an antivirus scan. It just popped up. Sorry. People who arrive in the morning, the average stay for a lot of those people is 2 to 3 hours. So we have people leaving midday, we have people leaving mid-afternoon, but then there's a peak of departure at the end of the day. But there's that peak, there's that overlap. And the point I was working towards is that on many of our days, we will have a 1 to 2 hour peak of traffic activity that on a good day is flowing, and the center lane or the outside lane is bypassing us. And people don't think much about our traffic. But then we have days, as you know, where there's aberrations. We can have a weekend of rain on a Saturday, Sunday, and suddenly an average attendance for a Saturday increases 15 or 20%. We can have an accident on the highway that has nothing to do with us, but starts a chain reaction with our traffic. We can have the stoplight controls that we are allowed through our DOT permitting to manage get out of sync. So then within those 19 days, we have some days where traffic is horrendous. It's a half hour to 1 hour delay on occasions for those last 5 miles to get to the Renaissance Festival. And some of you, I don't know if any of you were here when Superstition Mountain had the PGA. At one point, there was, for 2 or 3 years, the PGA and the festival operating simultaneously. We took a lot of credit for that too. By the way, just as a quick aside, the Superstition Mountain Country Club property was one of the sites considered for the Renaissance Festival. It was owned by the Resolution Trust as part of the whole savings and loan debacle of that era, and was for sale. I think it was for sale, the entire parcel, for $800,000. And that was too much money for us. It was too expensive. But anyhow, so we meet with DOT annually. We have a meeting with them next week. We have been working with them on refining our signage, refining the stoplight controls, refining personnel. We are working on increasing staffing to park multiple lots simultaneously. The goal is to take, when we have that larger peak, and even when we have the smaller peak, is to pull those cars off the highway quickly. Now, one thing a lot of people don't know is that we're one of the only of these types of venues, you know, compared to the amphitheaters and the sports venues and whatever, we don't charge for parking intentionally. We forego that revenue stream, which is an important revenue stream for a lot of venues, because we know that if we had to stop a car and collect money and make change and then park them, the problem would be tenfold. So we made that conscious decision many, many years ago to just forego it. So our ambition is to minimize the number of days that we have the extreme peaks. Again, some of them are out of our control based on weather and other factors. To take that peak window of peak traffic and to shorten it as quickly as possible to bring the patrons in. We can exit patrons slowly, and our exiting works pretty well overall. There are occasions, for example, when there's an incident on the highway where DPS will ask us to stop exiting the festival so they can clear an accident. We literally have to run around with golf carts along the lines of cars to explain to them why they're not being allowed to move, because people will be get upset, of course, when they're stopped from exiting. But generally, the exiting works well because we can control the flow out and let people out as the system can handle it. It's the entering that we are constantly working on with the growth of residential community, with the growth of the addition of the stoplights. And I expect many of you, maybe somebody will disagree with me, but many of you might agree with me that if you look at our community now today, compared to even 10 years ago, Monday through Friday, the amount of traffic that's coming through this area is just astounding to me. I don't know if it's Globe, Miami, whatever, but obviously there's more and more activity on our roadway. And again, a lot of that is, in part residential development around us here and then further to the east. There's been talk, as you all know, about a bypass road. And I do want, while I have your ear, I want to say something that I say in every meeting, DOT, and opportunity I have, and for your transportation committee, et cetera. We've always suggested that the bypass, if it should be built, should come back into 60, either to the west of the Renaissance Festival or have some pragmatic connection to the Renaissance Festival, because the plans we had seen more recently showed it re-entering 60 as it bypassed Gold Canyon to the further east of us. And that would mean that we would still have to bring our traffic through Gold Canyon, because you would be sending the traffic past us. They would have to then head to the west and U-turn back to the east, or be turned across the eastbound traffic to stop the eastbound traffic to enter the festival grounds. The best logic for placing these types of venues is a right turn in. That was another reason we were disinterested in Superstition Mountain Country Club's property back in those days. It was a left turn in. If you can right turn in your traffic, you can enter them quickly. You can exit them, as I said, more controlled. So we're very concerned and keeping an eye on the status of the bypass, because we're hoping it's a solution, not a new set of problems for an entertainment venue such as the Renaissance Festival. So, the only thing now is we've had a hiatus for almost 2 years because of COVID. We are concerned, as you likely know, staffing is an issue for everybody everywhere. We already know we have supply chain issues. We will probably not be able to offer all of our food items that we traditionally offer. We'll probably have to dial the menu down a little bit. There might be longer lines for service at food concessions, just like restaurants right now are having trouble staying open for all their hours. We don't know yet. We feel confident because we have so many people who have been with us all these years, but we see some percentage of risk there. And I think some of the traditional patterns, what I would call audience patterns or attendance patterns, I think some of those may be altered, but we don't know. We're going to have to get through a season now, I'll call it post-COVID for operating. I don't think we're post-COVID right now, obviously. But we will be open. We do have extensive COVID protocols in place, including for our own participants. We have a weekly pop-up clinic for testing every Wednesday, starting the Wednesday before we open. Every morning of the show, we have a rapid testing program with clinicians. This is for employees who don't have proof of vaccination, don't have a current test to show us. So we're being very proactive on sanitation. We have our own mask mandates. Even though there's no mask mandate in the county or the state currently, we're allowing our vendors who have booths and shops, the potters, jewelers, blacksmiths, clothiers, all the creative folks, they have the right to require a mask in their shop if they choose to. We do not have a mask mandate for the public, but we are encouraging masking, because it's a good practice. But there's some unknowns for us this year coming out of being closed for COVID, and we don't know fully what the ramifications will be until we get open. But we're going to be very proactive in operating safely, and we're very organized in terms of our registration system. So contact tracing for us is pretty easy because we know we have good access to who's where, how, and how to reach them in a hurry. So I don't mean to end on a COVID note here, but I want to say that I'm a proud resident of Gold Canyon. We do not take the position that, oh, we were here first, so suffer the fate of the Renaissance Festival. Our position is, we've been here for 34 years. We're not going away. We have residents who have been here, some for 34 years and many in the last 5, 10, 15 years. My neighboring residents aren't going away. So whatever we can do to work together to make sure the Renaissance Festival is a positive thing for the community as best as it can be, and less of an imposition on those who don't really care for the Renaissance Festival, and even more so hate its traffic. We didn't get up in the morning thinking, how do we make somebody's life miserable? When 34 years ago, everybody waved their hand and said, perfect location, beautiful mountains, our community wants you, we want the marketing, we want the promotion, we want the profile, we want the Far East Valley to have a big event, like Tempe and Scottsdale has a big event. But now we know that we are also an imposition on folks on the days we're open, where we, particularly on those days where we have extreme traffic, which we're working hard to try to mitigate, as I said earlier. So that's a little bit, I don't know if I've covered everything you're interested in hearing, but if you have some questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Mr. Siegel, this is Roberto Ravelis.
Yes, sir.
You have kindred spirits here with Gold Canyon Community Incorporated. I myself am a native Arizonan. I have lived through all but 20 of the first years of Arizona state history. I'm a 30-year resident of Gold Canyon, and I'm an acquaintance of the late Roy Hudson, who was a visionary who became the founding mayor of Apache Junction, a resident of Gold Canyon, a neighbor of ours. And also all of the wonderful assets that you pointed out, all of the challenges that you mentioned are items that we at Gold Canyon Community Inc. are devoted to working on. And yours was a very welcome presentation, because I personally, for example, recognize both the cultural and economic value of the art and the history of this region. I'm a founder of the museum in Miami, 45 miles east of here. And I'm a former participant in the Art on the Salt Trail as a sculptor myself. So we recognize both the values that you emphasized and the ongoing challenges. One of the major issues that we have been working on under the chairmanship of Jerry Stevenson is the traffic transportation issue. One of the things that we encourage also is that there may be differences of how to resolve some of the challenges, but we saw, for example, the need for traffic lights on US 60 when a number of our Gold Canyon residents, including neighbors of mine on Sleepy Hollow Trail, lost their lives on US 60. And US 60 is a major east-west route from New Mexico to California. And so we recognize these practical challenges, and we welcome very much the contribution that you've made of not only providing the cultural resource of the Renaissance Festival and highlighting the challenges to neighbors that come from it. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions first from our community participants.
Please unmute yourself.
Roberto, I'd like to ask Mr. Siegel a question. Well, first I want to say you provided us, me in particular, with a wonderful history of the real origin of the Gold Canyon area. Or I shouldn't say real, but an aspect that I hadn't heard before. I've been here, owned property here for 20 years. I've been to a lot of community meetings, and I knew certain aspects of the history, but it was just quite interesting to hear what you faced 35 years ago. Also, it was eye-opening to me that, it was Pinal County, it was the tourism board, it was the state land trust that was all interested in recruiting something for this area, because I think we're facing something similar to that day where those entities are trying to kickstart development in this area. Appreciate your concerns, and you're working on the traffic issues. But I simply, from a informational point of view, I wanted to ask, I believe that you run Renaissance festivals throughout the country at different times of the year. Is that accurate? I know at one time you had one in Northern California, but that closed in Nevada or Marin County.
That's very slightly accurate. As a younger person, I worked on Renaissance festivals in other parts of the country. I directed the Minnesota Renaissance Festival for many years, where I'm from, and that was one of the earliest in the genre. I have worked at other and helped or consulted with a few other Renaissance festivals. Myself personally, I'm involved with 2 Renaissance festivals. One in North Carolina, that is north of Charlotte, and the one here. And the only reason initially we started working with the second festival, there's a percentage, we have year-round staff here, we have year-round staff there, and then there's a core group that spends half their year here and half their year in North Carolina. That core group, I was always concerned about their ability to come back each year. So we got involved with the second Renaissance Festival so we could keep those folks hired and engaged on a year-round basis. So I've never been involved with the Northern California Renaissance Fair that's closed. There's probably, here's the best analogy. There's probably a dozen of these shows in the country that are of major league scale. There's another dozen that you might call triple A league scale. And then there's another dozen or so that are minor league scale in terms of they set up with tents and portable amenities.
The volume, your volume went down.
My audio went down?
Now it's up.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying that there's different, when I first started, there were just a few of these types of events, and they're of different scales and different types of operations. And now there's 50, 60, 70, 80 of them, a weekend on a college campus, a Renaissance fair in the park for one weekend in a small town, a college campus for a weekend that has a Renaissance festival. And they're not all equal. They're not all produced the same way. They don't all have great reputations. Some do, some don't. I'm very familiar with most of them because I've been in the field for now 50 years. But to get back to your question, no, I'm not involved with running these all over the country, just the 2 that I focus on.
Okay, that's very interesting because the common perception is that one person owns these all over the country, and hearing what you've had to say about the area, how you developed, the fact that you live here, the fact that you're committed to this area and to this location, in a sense, changes my perception of the Renaissance Fair as not simply something that comes in, doesn't care about the impact of the community, goes out and moves elsewhere. So I'm very, very delighted that I had the opportunity to hear this. And I, very much appreciate what I've learned today and what you've contributed. So thank you.
We deal with all kinds of rumors. There was a big wave of press attention about 3-4 years ago because the Minnesota Renaissance Festival is going to be relocating, apparently in some years. And so Minnesotans come down here and they're talking to their neighbors, and the old children's game, telephone game, where you start a conversation in one ear and you pass it from ear to ear and it becomes a whole new thing. Well, the media started calling us, and county commissioners, you're moving the Renaissance Festival. And by the way, if someone said, would you ever relocate the Renaissance Festival from Gold Canyon? My answer would be yes, sure. If you had a comparable opportunity, permittable, good traffic that worked better for everybody, and economics that made sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense for us to take 30 years of stage sets and production and everything we've put in place and just throw it away and start over. But if there was some functionable economics and there was a better site for everybody and enough time to make the transition, it might take a year or two to rebuild and then transition. I wouldn't rule out anything. I mean, I don't want to be in a neighborhood where I'm an imposition, but as I said earlier, we're here and the community is exploding around us in growth, and I'm just trying to cohabitate as best as we can and keep communication open.
Can we hear from another community person with any?
Yep. So Glenn has a question. Glenn, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Jeff Surdy mentioned, the commissioner, Pinell County, our commissioner, mentioned that the extension of 24 was going to go through and going to go right past the Renaissance Fair. Is that correct? And what is your take on that?
I really don't have up-to-date information on that. I was watching carefully, and I imagine all of you were as well, this recent state land discussion about the industrial zoning or whatever. I don't know the exact semantics. And if you don't mind, I just want to take a minute and tell you, I don't have enough, because I try to look at everything, both from the Renaissance Festival point of view and both from my point of view as a resident, because that development impacts both ways. And I thought what was happening initially, I thought it was quite good. I thought, okay, the state land department cannot give land to conservation, but if they sell 1,000 acres with a stipulation that 200 acres of the mountain base must be put into conservation or parkland or whatever, that developer is solving the problem for that 200 acres. And now we found a backdoor channel for the state land department to allow us to preserve our mountain, number one. Then I thought, gee, if we get clean industry and attractive industry, maybe more people will live here and drive to work in 5 minutes instead of clogging our road systems, living beautifully out here, but driving into Tempe or Mesa or wherever they may work, because we don't have as many jobs here. And by the way, also that it would help fund the creation of these road improvements that we feel we need. So, and my initial reaction to the state land department wanting to do this directly across from the Renaissance Festival was, number one, it's not our place to oppose it as the Renaissance Festival. It's our place to support what the community wants, because it's not about the impact on the Renaissance, it's about the impact on Gold Canyon. And boy, is this a great opportunity to save some of the mountain and get some roads built. That would also help mitigate the Renaissance traffic. Now, I don't know if 24 was that a piece of that particular puzzle. And I was sad that the state land department people could not sort of get the point across to the community meeting that all we want to do at this point is analyze it and discuss it before it gets shot down or shouted down. Because I thought it might have potential to help us out here. But I want to circle back to my first comment. I don't know that I have enough information yet on what they really wanted to do there to be able to have that be my full-blown position on it. I just didn't get a chance to get enough information before it went away. And so I don't know. I'm sure you folks have talked about that a great deal.
Yes, Mr. Siegel, let me briefly comment on that. We were a key player in that discussion, and I personally feel that we did not have a full opportunity to look at both the positive opportunities and the problematic challenges that would come from it. And so I don't want us to get into a debate on that, because there are strong views that are held by various people that are in our community. But we have set in motion a process that we hope will be a positive and constructive way towards resolving the constant challenge of development versus no development, or development with these mitigating elements or not. But moving on to another community person who might have a question or comment.
Yeah, I have. This is Abe Guy. Jeff, thanks for being with us. I've
Abe,
heard.
can I interrupt you?
Yes,
You're the
sir.
one who wanted me in on this meeting. So you see, I'm here now. Will you please release the hostage?
We appreciate your time, Jeff. I've heard talking about rumors. One rumor is that you might extend it another month and go into April. So is that true or not? And why haven't you maybe decided to stay longer? Because you're set up for 2 months after all this work. So that's my question.
We, depending on how, the calendar moves a little bit with leap years, and with us, we've adjusted our dates occasionally because of Super Bowl. We're resigned to the fact that we're going to overlap now forever with this, because the NFL keeps moving the Super Bowl. But we have, for many of our 34 years, overlapped into the first weekend in April. We have no desire to extend the Renaissance Festival for another month. The weekends we've set now should be our weekends. We've given up trying to move around the Super Bowl. But this year we will be open. I think it is the first weekend in February through the first weekend in April will be the season. But we will not. And the other part of your question, you were asking why we're not like Rawhide or something that was open all year round or all season for tourists. We are a special event with a certain special event energy. We could see 500 people a day and be open for, 5 months, or we can see 10,000 people a day in a shorter window. The energy of the Renaissance Festival is intended to have 3,000 people cheering knights in armor around the horse arena. So we don't want to be that kind of tourist attraction that's just open, for months and months and months,
Thank you.
Any other community member want to question or comment?
This is Mike DeRosa.
Go ahead,
And my comment is, listen, first of all, thanks for everybody's participation, but it would seem that the task that perhaps our organization has is to help out the traffic concern, because again, I'm new here, just about a year, and the one thing that all my neighbors told me about is wait for the Renaissance Festival. Traffic is terrible. You've got to plan your life around the traffic flow. I'm not going to be that wild about that, but what can we do to assist the Renaissance Festival and help our neighbors take care of this, what they consider a problem?
Well, I don't mean to be goofy here, but my biggest concern right now is having an ample staffing for the parking. We've got a lot of good people coming back. We know they're coming back, but I've seen and got reports from my counterparts elsewhere where on any given day, 20 or 30 people who signed up to work and took an orientation and 2/3 of them didn't even call, and they just changed their mind and didn't even tell them. You know, we want to handle the audience well. So I'm a little nervous. I'm being honest with you about all of it. I mean, I'm just nervous about staffing this year,
Sure.
and I'll be out there. So if you want to come out on the weekends and help us park cars, or if you know anybody,
Never know.
You
My
wanna-
question was really more at the Gold Canyon organization. Steve, you're the transportation guy. You know, Jeff is doing what he can do. Is there anything that we can do, even if it's just a matter of sending out emails to all the members on a regular basis concerning traffic and what's going on? Would that be better, so that we don't have that telephone problem where people just, you know, exaggerate the problems as they talk to one another? Anything we could do?
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else from the community? If not, I'd like to open it to our board members.
I have one to follow up on that, Jeff. Do you have any historical data as to the peak times for traffic that we could publish so people can do what Mike was saying to plan our exits and entrance into the community? Do you have that kind of data?
Well, I don't have it as, I mean, years ago, we did a bunch of analysis, not in recent years. In recent years, we keep a professional traffic engineering firm on retainer because we're constantly studying signage and flow. And, you know, to give you just one example, and I'll get back to your point of your question. DOT wanted us to change how we split the traffic into 2 lanes for parking multiple lots. They wanted us to do it outside the gate on 60. We currently bring in that far right lane. The far left lane is bypassing lane. Far right lane is a single stream that we split internally and start parking. They wanted us to do it outside the gate, the split. DPS and our operations staff said, you know, that's not really going to work. Well, we're traffic engineers. Put the signs this way, put the cones this way, change the signs this way, it'll work. First weekend, it was a disaster. Everybody kept forcing themselves and crossing into each other. It didn't work. Hey, you guys, we don't think this is going to work. We want to go back to what we were doing. You're delaying traffic. No, it'll work. Try it this way. Move the cones this way, move the signs. We're 2 weekends in. They've sent somebody down every day from DOT. He would stand there and say, yeah, you're right, this is not working. He'd go back and report, and they'd have us change the signs and the cones again. We went through 3 weekends. They put up cameras. We were the second test of DOT's new drone system for studying bridges and whatever. They kept saying, you know, we're going to check the cameras to see if you're telling us the truth. Well, we were telling you the truth. So finally, by our 4th weekend, they let us go back to what we've been doing all those years that was working. And by the way, I don't want to besmirch DOT in this comment. They have been so great to work with over the decades. We had this one story I'm telling you was just one little odd incident, but we use our traffic engineer to help us work through these kinds of issues and problems and to help us study it. I can just tell you generally that from about 11 until 1 typically, and sometimes 1:30 to 2 on a busy day, that's the peak of entering, exiting, especially from that noon to 2, because there's people that arrived at 10 and are leaving at noon or 12:30 or 1. They've had their 2 or 3 hours of fun and they're ready to go on and do something else. So it's really a midday peak from around 11 to 1 and sometimes in the 2. But then there are days, there's aberrations, and there's days when there's no peak. It just flows through, people park, and you wouldn't know we're there. So I don't know. I don't have a statistical analysis to provide you, though.
Any other board?
Sorry, just to say any
Go
other
ahead,
questions?
Jeff. Yeah, if I may, one of our board members does have another one.
Yes, please. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, Jerry Stevenson, I'm from Mountain Brook, and I've been working with the DOT and Canal for several years now. And I'm wondering if there's a way with your key people and traffic and planning that we could sit down, have a discussion. Because our work has been focused on not only the long term, but more importantly, the short term with this bulge of traffic that you identified. And we need some more muscle. We need some more attention. They're doing their bit with a safety study, but I think we need some more intellectual capital, like a traffic study group or traffic engineering group, because we have the same issue. We're average citizens and we deal with the DOT and their issues. It would be helpful if there's a person or a go-to that we could work with on your side, or attend a meeting with the DOT with you or something, just as an observer to just absorb, and because it's a long-term problem, not only of the 2 or 3 months you were in, but overall we have that problem. So if you have someone or you could think about that, that'd be helpful.
Why don't you have the organizer who has my contact send me your email contact, and I'll reach out to you and we can discuss that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Very
Yeah, I'd
good.
be glad to. Thank you.
Gentlemen,
Pardon me?
this is Steve Nauer. I have a question. Can you share with us how many jobs the Renaissance provides throughout the year and then in peak season, as well as what the economic impact is to the county? Because I don't think we ever hear those positive things about the fair.
Well, yeah, I mean, and keep in mind, the Renaissance Festival has its level of participation and impact and employment, but then we also have nearly 200 individual entrepreneurs who, everything from just individual artisan to somebody who has 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 employees. So, and I don't have all of their data, and of course, every one of them is charging sales tax for their sales. So there's that sales tax revenue flowing through from all the vendor sales. All of our sales are taxable, of course. We have about 25 people that are full-time. As we get into the show preseason, 2 or 3 months, that can fluctuate anywhere from 40 to 60. But once we open, it's hundreds of people working. And then we have our performing group. That side of the equation is another 500-600 participants, performing artists, everything from full-time professionals to community theater people who would probably do it for free somewhere in their community theater, but we take every effort to pay them something so that they are professionals. We want to do that even if it's a modest contract for a community theater person, so we have a right to tell them to behave like a professional, you know. So when I say, hey, you know, this is, and I can tell you, I know young adults now who their very first contract as a performing artist was playing the violin at the Renaissance Festival or something. And by the way, folks, I don't mean to cut you short. I had planned about 30, 45 minutes. It's almost 10 o'clock and I have an obligation at 10. So
yeah, and Mr. Siegel, want to thank you very much for your very informative presentation. And I'd like to welcome you to, at any point, contact us after we conclude this meeting. But I think your presentation very effectively points out that there are values that are both economic and cultural values that benefit the community. And it's important for us to keep in mind that the quality of life of all of us is dependent on us accommodating ourselves to some inconveniences from time to time. So thank you again, Mr. Siegel, for an excellent presentation. And I'd like to announce that our next month's meeting will be on the first Saturday, March 5th. We'll have a panel of water experts presenting to the community. So again, Mr. Siegel, thank you very much, and thanks to the community.
can I just say in departing here, I want to thank you as well for this opportunity and to get acquainted with this relatively new organization, because we need this. I mean, Adobe's worked hard over the years. Other people have individually, Sandy Smith, bless her heart, has been our great advocate forever. So I'm so glad to know of your existence and what you're trying to do, because it's another, and seems to me, a very professional approach to trying to address these issues in our community. So thanks for my opportunity to be introduced to you today. Thank you truly.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you all.
Meeting is adjourned. I'm sorry.
Do you want any other committee?
We don't have time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Where do we meet next month?
March 5th.
Where?
And because of the COVID continuing challenges, that will be decided in plenty of time, hopefully, for everybody to conveniently plan on participating. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Abe, for the introduction to Jeff.
Thanks, Roberta. Appreciate
You're
it.
very welcome.
Thank you, Glenn.